Evet
Okay,
arkadaşlar,
perfect.
Twitter'dan size Steve'i paylaşmıştım. Palet satışlar yapan bir private label satıcısı kendisi. Amerika'da işte markalar satın alıp satıyorlar vesaire. Geliştiriyorlar. Bugün onları konuşacağız. Nasıl yapıyorlar bu ticareti? Nerelere geldiler? Kendisi kimdir vesaire diye. Şimdi İngilizceye dönüyorum. Altı alt yazı koyacağız. Sağdan alt yazılardan sadece alt yazıyı seçin. Oradan kullanmaya devam edebilirsiniz. Okay. Steve Roll. The name is Steve, so we know that. Other than that, how did you get into business, man? Everybody curious. Like,
Yeah,
tell us
I'll
about
give
it.
you the short version because I've done much longer versions. I know we don't have too much time here,
Yeah, yeah, sure.
but my wife actually started the first Amazon store that I got involved in. So my early career, I got out of college. I'm a civil engineer by trade, got a master's in civil engineering, but I was in the military, did ROTC in college. So I was
Mm.
doing my military thing, working 13, 14, 15 hours a day while she was helping out her mom with the e-commerce side of her mom's business. And that all culminated into me helping her be more successful on Amazon because I noticed her commissions were getting lower and lower. And I wanted to kind of dig in and be the engineer who comes in and says, like, well, what were you doing when things are going well? Let's do more of that and less of the stuff that's not going well now. And that's the long story short of me getting involved in Amazon in the first place. Now, if you back up a couple of years when I was in college, I was selling fake goods on eBay. So I had a closet full, looked like a lid store that you would see in a mall of snapback hats, New Era, Jordan. But there was, if you looked closely at it, you'd always see the Jordan foot wasn't exactly right. Like it would go the wrong direction, or the New Era hat wasn't exactly pristine. So you kind of knew it was a knockoff, but nobody cared on eBay. This is back in like 2009, 2010. So I had some e-commerce experience already, and it was just reselling some of these brands, but I knew I was selling knockoffs and being a terrible person. So I don't advise anyone to do that, but you got away with it back then. My Amazon journey from helping my wife out turned into helping another business to get to $150,000 a month in sales, and then starting my own store, starting my own brands from there. And that kind of leads us to where we are today, where I'm kind of getting to the end of my Amazon only journey and focusing a lot more on direct to consumer, investing in other people's brands, doing all of the cool cutting edge stuff on Amazon, like Amazon Business, selling by the pallet, focusing in on where the growth is going to be in the future, a big push on content, and leading me up to the next phase of my career, which is going to be more rolling up e-commerce brands underneath USA manufacturing and starting a private equity fund to do more of that.
I see. So you said you sell like fake goods in eBay even in the start. So everybody can do a little bit arbitrage here and there. Like don't sell the fake goods now. He says oh 09, oh like 10,
Yeah.
it's early days of the e-commerce, so you could get away with it easy. Now some Turkish sellers try to sell fake Nike socks and stuff like that. All of their account get deactivated. Nowadays,
Yes.
Amazon
Yeah.
doesn't play a bit. Like Steve is doing private label now. The most legit business you can do, right? You manufacture it and you sell it. It's your own brand. Even with that, you can have like the wishes to choices. You showed it actually one time you did a mispricing on your pallets, like at $6,
Yes.
$60, but it should be like more than that. You canceled it. Even your account got like it couldn't get deactivated that easily, but still it's an issue. So you gotta be
Exactly.
so
Well, I think that there's like, as you grow and scale in your Amazon operation, because it used to just be me. Like it was just me for 2 years, 2018, 2019. In 2020, I had my good friend who was an accountant for a big firm called RSM who joined me. So it was the two of us. From 2020 to 2022, we scaled all the way up to $5 million a year in sales, just the two of us. Now where we're at today, where we'll sell 12 or 13 million this year, and we're on track, I think, to do 50 million a year by 2030. We do have a team of 20 people all over the world who are helping us,
mm,
6 people in the US. But when you scale up your operation like that so quickly because you want to achieve greatness in the future, what you kind of have to be okay with is that mistakes are going to be made, because there's never a chance that I'm going to list a pallet for $60. It ain't going to happen. I care too much. I'm too far in the weeds in the business every single day. It's just never going to happen. But when you start to hire people who start to hire people who start to hire people, now you're opening up the door. And yes, you can scale greatly, but at the same time, there's going to be people who are making mistakes. And I
yeah.
heard someone say this, I loved it. They said, the bigger your business gets, there's always someone at any given moment who's actively making a mistake that you as the owner would never have made. But you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay living with that. And so for me, as we've grown in scale, we've had these issues where sometimes things get mispriced. It's the cost of doing business. Kind of have to figure it out and roll with it from there.
Of course. So basically, you don't create them, right? You just buy them.
Yeah, so we don't do any of our own manufacturing and never have. And so what we would think of ourselves as is a virtual manufacturer and brand owner, in that we're not tied to the manufacturers that we use. They're just our contract manufacturers. And because we own all the intellectual property from the formula to the look of the tubes, we can go and make those in Malaysia or make them in Mexico. We choose to make most of our stuff in China because of pricing. But as the world changes and tariffs go up and down, we have the flexibility as a contract manufacturing virtual manufacturer to shift those operations elsewhere if we need to. But we don't do any of the manufacturing ourselves.
Oh, that sounds interesting. So how do you decide to buy the brand? Which, for example, Terrapura, you very social about it, you already showed us that brand. So how was in revenue they were doing amount? What mistakes they were doing, so you fix it now. You guys doing good in revenue or in margin?
I'll say this. Terrapura is not a brand that I started, but it's a brand that I started actually reselling as a value-added wholesaler from day one. And if you go back and look at my whole story, there's two people, their names aren't relevant, but they started Terrapura more than 20 years ago. And they were only selling Terrapura hospitality tube size. And because they were only selling to hotels, they didn't actually realize that they had built a brand over time. They just thought, hey, we made this brand, hotels like it, they love it, we sell a lot of it wholesale to them. So when I got involved in 2018 and I realized, okay, you've had national distribution all over North America of this brand for 15 years, but you've never tried to sell it on Amazon. So I get on Amazon, I look at Amazon, and I see that there's a lot of resellers who are selling Amazon. This is a long time ago, so there was maybe 3 or 4 resellers who were selling it. Resellers inherently are never going to invest in a brand the same way that the brand will. They don't really care about your brand the same way that you care about it. So what that looks like is they're not really worried about the customer experience. As long as they're making a buck today, the customer experience can come second. They're not really worried about advertising in your brand because they're in it to make a buck today. So if advertising is going to make them money today, they'll advertise. But most brands have to invest money in advertising and maybe even lose money on the first sale to actually build the brand slowly over time, get it in front of a lot of people, especially with a repeat purchase product like Terrapura. So what I saw was resellers who were doing the brand a disservice, and total Amazon sales at the time for Terrapura was around $250,000 a year on Amazon. And I knew it could be so much more than that. Resellers also are not going to, generally speaking, make new value-added SKUs. They want to go the easy route. So if you sell it in a case of 1,000, they want to sell it in a case of 1,000. A lot of resellers are getting smart to this now and differentiating themselves by taking that 1,000 pack and breaking it down to 100 and 10 and 15 to be more value added because it's just so much more competitive. You have to do that. But at the time, these resellers were doing it all the easy way, making zero investment and not representing the brand well. The images sucked on the listings. Not that mine were that much better when I started, but again, this is the Wild West days of Amazon. So when you fast forward the story from $250,000 in sales of Terrapura back in 2018, all done by resellers, the brand took over Terrapura. That was me. I was the reseller. I was wholesaling for them. I wasn't involved in the company, but I took over all the sales. We kicked all the other resellers off the platform. All sales had to go through me. But I cared about it because I saw the potential to be an equity owner and actually own this brand one day and knew that I could make millions of dollars by doing it. So we updated all the images. We got them Amazon ready at the time, which again, for me at the time was doing it in PowerPoint and making it look good, taking a screenshot. You couldn't zoom into it. It was like the old school of Wild West days. But we represented the brand with the right brand colors, the same brand messaging that went out to these hotels, we were now using on the Amazon listings too. Revamped all the titles, all the bullets, things that resellers generally never touch. on a listing. They don't do the listing optimization. They're not worried about SEO research. They're just looking for things that are already moving that they can buy. But as a value-added wholesaler, I wanted to help us grow and move a lot more products. So I went into the back end, read a few books on listing optimization, and we started to actually optimize those listings. But most importantly, we started to invest like the brand owner would and care like the brand owner would. Customer service was booming through the roof. We took care of every single customer. But the investment was the most important piece, because I was willing to lose money on the first sale, because I knew if I can package this from 1,000 pieces into what a vacation rental owner would need, who maybe only rents out a room in their house, and maybe they just want 10 shampoos, 10 conditioners, 10 bar soaps, enough to get them through a month's supply.
Man,
Because they don't have a big storage room.
some
They have a closet.
some people crazy and paranoid. They just take stuff. Even that can happen.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was thinking is, if we can break it down into a small enough amount that they can use it, and if someone takes it, hey, no big deal, because they can always buy some more. Now we have a repeat purchase product that people can come back to time and time again to buy from us. If I know you're going to come back and buy from me time and time again, now I'm willing to invest advertising dollars today and maybe even lose money on the first sale, because I know that 2 months from now, you come back, you buy it again. And odds are you're not going to go through ads to buy it again. You're going to hit buy it now in your Amazon order. And when you order from me the 10th time and the 15th time, I'm now flowing in the profits because I made that investment on the front end. There are very few resellers who think like that when it comes to Amazon, especially with repeat purchase products. They want to be profitable right now. They're not thinking and playing the long game because, frankly, they don't own the brand and they don't know how long they're going to be able to sell this product before more competition comes in. But when you know that you've got it on an exclusive contract, or you are the brand owner, you are making investments in the brand. And so let's go back to what the story was. 2018, $250,000 in sales. Now, people can check me on this by looking at Helium 10, Jungle Scout, Smart Scout, whatever your tool is to check what the brand sales are. This year, TerraPure will sell $9 million. From $250 to $9 million under that one brand.
I can watch. I just stalked it a little bit.
Right? That is because of the investment that was made in the brand overall. And resellers are not solving the problem for most brands. Much of the time, resellers are the problem for most brands. And when you can be the brand owner and you own the intellectual property and you have staying power and you make the right investments in that brand, you can go from $250,000 of sales a year to 9 million. Like, that's very possible to do, but it has to be done with a long-term approach. And that's what I brought to the table for these two owners that started TerraPure 20 years ago that they'd never seen before. Now I own a chunk of their business, about a third of it. Each of them owns about a third of it too. And we've more than doubled the value of the business by focusing on Amazon and actually removing resellers and letting the people that care about the brand the most and the customer the most and the customer experience the most focus on being the ones that actually sell the product.
Do you like ever help or create these businesses and sell your own equity, or you just like keep growing them?
So it's a great question, because part of my story that a lot of people don't know about is that before I joined the company that I now have the equity stake in, and we merged our forces together, I actually had my wholesale business up for sale. Because in 2021, the owners of this company that owned all the intellectual property of what I was selling came to me and said, hey, we want to sell. I couldn't afford to buy them out at the time. And I had no idea what the business was worth. I thought, hey, maybe it's worth $1 million. You know, I've sold about $2 million. I've made about $1 million because the margins were 50% back then when I had no team and it was just me. Like, we were booming back then. But I didn't really know if I had staying power, if my exclusive contract with them was going to stand up. So I thought, I'm going to try to sell my stuff first. And so I listed my business for sale, what I thought was worth $1 million. When I went under contract 3 months later with a public company here in the US that wanted to buy us, it went under contract for $6 million. And I'm thinking in the first day, like, I'm rich, like, I've made it, like, this is it, like, I've cracked the code to. It's funny that when you sleep on that $6 million offer for 2 weeks, and you start to think about all the time and effort that you put into making it what it actually became, and you look at where you're at and you say, okay, I've sold 2 million, and most of my business is from repeat purchases, and I kind of cracked the code on the ads. why would I get off for 6 million if this could be 100 million 10 years from now? I better stick right where I'm at. So I got really cold feet on that deal, pulled out of that deal, and then ended up merging with the company that owned the intellectual property to solidify the staying power for what I had built at that point. But I've always had my mind open to selling the equity that's there. I'm just not at a point right now that there's anything I want to get rid of that I don't think I can continue to grow myself. Because for instance, if I sell TerraPure right now and I'm right about what's going to happen with pallets and selling by the pallet over the next 5 years in Amazon Business, we're selling $12 million this year. I think it's going to be 50 in 2030. And even if our margins were to go down between now and then, you're still talking about a 300% increase on the value of the stake of the business. And I don't want to sell until I either see a plateau without any guidance for growth in the future, or I'm fresh out of ideas where it's like, I don't know what I would do next to grow this business another 300%. Now it's time for me to sell. But as long as I have ideas and ways to get the team spun up of what the vision should be for the future and where the world is going, I'm never selling anything, because the cash flow is too good, number one, and the potential is too great, number two.
Okay, man, you give out a lot of game good today. We're really thankful. By the way, I'm gonna ask what was I gonna ask? Do you use a lot of like keywords as like bulk, like pallets, like for hospital maybe? And you use
Yeah,
that?
we try to use long tail keywords that use bulk. Now, keep in mind, the average person who's coming on Amazon who wants to buy soap for their Airbnb, they don't want a pallet of it.
Because first thing I noticed, I typed like I didn't type the AdSense you showed in the schools, the sales
Yeah,
screenshots. I just say like Terapure. None of the pallet listings are on the first page. Like,
yeah, yeah. I'll tell you why that is. The pallet listings probably wouldn't be on the second page, third page, or fourth page. And so we've been very strategic about how we've thought about adding pallets to our catalog. This is a long-term strategic play for when pallets become big, and when we know competitors of ours that aren't on Amazon today are going to see the opportunity and come onto Amazon. So since we know that's coming in the future, and if I'm right, and Amazon Business is going to grow from $30 billion a year to $600 billion a year, when they start the trajectory of moving up that way, our competitors who don't sell on Amazon are going to hop in. And when they hop in to sell by the pallet, they're going to have 0 reviews on their listings. Ours are going to have hundreds of reviews on them. How do we accomplish that? It's because we've always made our pallets a variation of the smaller version of the SKU. So Amazon's never going to pop the pallet up unless you hit the exact right keyword that we're advertising that pallet on, because they're going to take the ASIN that sells more often than not inside that parent ASIN and show you that instead. And so unless you're typing in the right keywords for it, you're not going to see a pallet pop up. But everyone who pops up, or everyone who types in a keyword and comes to that single box of our ASIN, if they're looking for it, they're going to see that there's 3 variations. And one of those variations is to buy a half pallet. Another one of those variations is to buy a full pallet of that product too. This is strategic because I know in the long run, the trick is not to always have something that's patented that no one else can copy. People have been copying me since the day I started on Amazon. All of our competitors have the exact same images, video ads. They're copying exactly what I've been doing. I'm good with that. I can live with that because
right now
I'm
they
going to be 10
can't
steps
copy your
ahead.
A+ contents. You have your family pictures.
That's right. That is true. So I got to have like a verbal like copyright or something on that, you know? But they copy everything else. The trick is to be ahead of them by 10 steps. If you don't have a patent and you can't protect yourself elsewhere, continue to innovate. And that's my job as the business owner, is to drive innovation with our team to make sure that we stay ahead. So here's what that looks like. 10 years from now, businesses are going to be buying, instead of from distributors, from Amazon, because Amazon will give them same-day shipping on a pallet, right? That's where logistics is going to be going. They already did that for parcels. They're going to do it for the pallet next. So distributors aren't going to have the same logistics chain that Amazon has, and Amazon's going to knock a lot of distributors out of the water with that. So now, all of a sudden, instead of this B2B relationship of, oh, I know Bob, and Bob's a good guy, so I buy from Bob, it's all going to be based off of speed number one. And number two, it's all going to get based on what Amazon is today, the search engine, the SEO, and can you get enough clicks on your listing to buy? So when you know people are going to be spending $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 on a pallet, and it's going to go back to the SEO, the time to position for that is now. And that's what I've done with my team. Before the market gets big, we're positioned now. Our competitors pop in, they list their pallet of shampoo conditioner for hotels to buy, no reviews, no social proof. And they don't even know how to go about getting those reviews, because you're going to put a pallet on Vine and give away pallets to get reviews. Like, that wouldn't make any sense to do, or you give away too much product for what you're actually going to make in the long run. The cost is going to be too great. But because we position now and we've made our pallets as variations of the existing ASINs that we've been selling for years, and it's hard to get reviews in B2B. It's super hard. You get 250 reviews in B2B, like, you're killing it. On the consumer side, 10,000 reviews is the equivalent of 250 reviews on the B2B side of the house. So when our pallet ASINs have 250 reviews of social proof and sales history, and people see that, versus this other one that might even be a better brand, but it has no reviews. It might even be better quality than we have, but it has no reviews. It might be cheaper than us, but it has no reviews. You compare the 0 review to the 250 review. A year goes by, you compare the 10 reviews to the 350 reviews. Which one are you going to buy?
Well,
That's why I'm saying
especially
$50 million a year by 2030.
especially if I'm like a hospital and buying like $3,000 worth of pilot, I will check out the reviews, of course.
Yes.
This is not a
Yes.
$10 product, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I think you have to have the vision today to prepare before the boom comes. Because to be frank and honest with you, we sell a pallet every 3 or 4 days right now. We're not selling pallet every day. Most of our sales, we average maybe $30,000 of sales a day. Most of it's still the single units that are coming through. But when you sell those pallets, you see a vision of what's coming in the future. And I think too many people are so focused on, what am I getting out of this today? Amazon's my side hustle. They're not looking at it long term. In e-commerce, all of the work gets done up front. You have to buy the trademark, buy the inventory, make your listing, turn the ads on before you ever see $1 come through in a sale. Especially when it's a high valued item like buying by the pallet, you're putting tens of thousands of dollars investing in this before it ever becomes anything. And you don't always have a great level of, hey, this is working because somebody bought one. I'm surprised that we've sold the number of pallets that we have up to this point, because the world hasn't changed yet. Amazon's logistics haven't caught up to this just yet. So the ones that we have sold is certainly a nice little pat on the back and motivation to continue moving forward with it. But for most people, they're not willing to make the investment today of both the time, the effort, and the money to see what it can be in the future. And it's like, I say $50 million by 2030. They're like, but what is it today? Okay, I don't get an ROI on this today. I'm not doing that. And I think that's where I've been different on Amazon, is by looking to the future and being willing to put in the time and effort today before the sales potential is there. Because by the time it gets there and people can use Helium 10 and Jungle Scout to see, oh, people are buying by the pallet, I better list these pallets. I need to be so far ahead of them from a social proof standpoint, and on reviews, and on sales velocity, and inside Amazon's algorithm, that this one sells well, that's the one people are going to buy. And if we already know that the majority of the sales go to the top line on Amazon, or the first 3 on a mobile phone, 87%, something crazy like that, then positioning now for what can be the future is vitally important. And let's say that I'm wrong. Let's say that I'm wrong and businesses are not going to start buying by the pallet. My worst case scenario right now is that only the pallets I sell today, every 3 or 4 days, that turn into repeat business, and they come back and buy more 6 months from now, they come back and buy more 12 months from now. That is the best, that's the worst case scenario for me, is that it just continues to trickle in. But when it trickles in with repeat business, what that turns into is a volume of repeat business. Because I've seen this play out before. I know what it's like when you're just getting the first sale. I'm like, when am I going to come back to buy more? But 5 years goes by, and even with that trickle, you're selling 10 pallets a day of items that go from 3,000 to 6,000. Now remember, we're selling $30,000 a day right now. 10 pallets a day could double or triple our current sales. And that's if I'm wrong about this and companies don't lean in. If companies do lean into this, which I think they will because of Amazon's superior logistics long term, it's like, watch out. My $50 million could be $250 million at that point.
Well,
That's if I'm right.
Well, even if you are wrong, you still like made the money by selling the pallets by then. But I like realized something too. You always had to like, even though like small schools of yours, not the pallet ones, are like built together like bundle products. Like I didn't see a
Yeah,
single unit like only one. I think it was $29. Other than that,
yeah,
you give the like a whole set wipe to all the products.
yeah.
That's
I
but
believe
smart,
that
I think.
the people that make the most money in e-commerce and the people that are most successful on Amazon are trailblazers. It's like everyone else is selling single units because people want cheap single units on Amazon. There's someone who's zigzagging the other way who's saying, I'm only going to sell items that cost $100. If I sell it less than 100, it's still going to be a bundle of some type, or I'm going to sell some type of bulk. Doing the opposite thing of the crowd. If you watch most Amazon gurus on YouTube, they would tell you stay away from the topicals category. You're just setting yourself up for a lawsuit. That's where I want to be. I want to be where the gurus tell people not to be. Because now I'm not competing with 100 sellers. I have 4 main competitors. And other people have tried to come in, but because of how we positioned over the last 5 years and our competitors have positioned over the last 5 years, there's a real moat. You can't come into our category as the low price, the mid priced, or up with us in the luxury category because everybody has such good products and such great reviews that you'd have to be willing to lose millions of dollars to knock one of us out and replace us for it. So I just believe in doing things differently, being a pioneer, being a trailblazer, and not doing what everybody else is doing. But it depends on what you're looking for. Like you said earlier, if you want to make $500 and that's going to be something that can actually do you better, be life-changing money, fantastic. Like there's so many methods for you to do inside Amazon on that. If you want to make millions and you want to have an exit one day, you've got to be thinking a lot differently than how everyone else is thinking because people don't get rich together. The masses never get rich at the same time. You see it in the stock market. Anytime everybody piles in because something's bound to happen, you get poor together. Everybody loses money
Nope.
together, but people don't get rich together.
Yeah, I hate the same thing with crypto. When crypto gets up, I buy it, and it goes down after some war happens, stuff like
Yeah.
that. You are pretty safe in Twitter right now, then. You hate gurus. They are
Yes.
on attack to gurus right now. Like,
Oh yeah.
like
Yep.
exposing their storefronts and stuff. Why they don't like expose your store, man? It's a good as case study.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I've invited them to look at my stuff. Say, test every word I've said on Twitter.
Hmm.
Go look at the sales and expose me. If you look at my stores, and I operate 4 different stores on Amazon, you're going to see about 1,000 products across those stores. The big hate on the Amazon gurus right now is all you're doing is selling courses. You're not actually selling stuff yourself. So they go to that person's store and they see, dude, you're selling 12 items, but you're telling me that you're doing millions of sales? Like that can't actually be the case. So you're making more money from courses than you are from actually selling on Amazon yourself. That is 99%. I shouldn't say 99. I think it's true though. 99% of successful course sellers are focused on selling the course, building a funnel and digital marketing. They're not focused on the thing that they're actually teaching and staying with their craft. So when you have someone like me that comes in who's selling millions of dollars a year, 8 figures on Amazon, and I'm talking about it, dude, I have nothing to sell you. I don't have a course. I don't have a mentorship program. You know how many times I get a DM throughout the day of someone saying, "Hey, can you mentor me?" I was like, "I'll hop on a call with you because I want to get you on the right track, and I enjoy talking about this stuff. It helps me refine my craft. But we'll do a 20-minute talk, but I don't want to sell you something on the back end of that. I'm making so much money doing what I'm doing that why would I slow down to make a course
Hmm.
to sell people and try to convince you to give me $2,000 to come watch my course? If I ever make a course, it will be a free course as a funnel to get more people interested in what I'm doing as an investor so that when you reach the thresholds where you need investment and someone like me can come in to help you scale it, now you think, hey, I know Steve. I like Steve. I've seen his course. It helped me get to where I am today. I believe he can help me get from $500,000 in sales to $10 million in sales. That's why I would make a course. It would be some type of a clickbait to help people